Mini wind turbines being built in Nottinghamshire, many for export to the United States. How much will they cost when they get there? No one knows, at least until Donald Trump announces his tariffs. A short time ago, his press secretary confirmed the tariffs will kick in tomorrow, adding that they're not starting a global trade war today because, well, that could look foolish.
My understanding is that the tariff announcement will come tomorrow. They will be effective immediately. And the president has been teasing this for quite some time, as you know. He's talked a lot about April 2nd as Liberation Day in America. It would be taking place today if not for April Fool's Day.
Manufacturers here aren't laughing, and the wind turbine firm are clear on who will end up paying.
There was a consignment left us yesterday.
Do you know how much that's going to cost when it gets there?
Well, the customer's already paid us for the consignment, so any additional costs, regrettably, will probably be borne by him.
Do you think it would do damage to your business if these tariffs came in?
Oh, certainly. I mean, I think it will hurt us. I think it will hurt the American consumer a lot more.
Ever since the Prime Minister's trip to the White House, the UK has been trying to negotiate an exemption, a carve-out. It's reported to be all but signed, so the government is treading ever so carefully.
We'll take the steps that we need to take to cover every eventuality. But the message I get very strongly from UK businesses is we support the government's approach, it's calm-headed, it's engaged, it's pursuing our national interest. And while there's a potential for a deal to be done, we want you to remain engaged.
But softly, softly isn't everyone's approach. The EU are openly threatening retaliation.
Europe has not started this confrontation. We do not necessarily want to retaliate. But if it is necessary, we have a strong plan to retaliate and we will use it.
And that causes economic damage here. A US tariff of 20% on all goods is forecast to trigger a 0.6% drop in GDP next year. If there's global retaliation, GDP could be down a full percentage point.
If tariffs at 20-25% were put on the UK and maintained for 5 years, our assessment of what that does is that it will knock out all the headroom that the government currently has.
So this isn't just about big exporters. No more fiscal headroom means the Chancellor could yet again have to find more spending cuts or more tax rises. The turbulent trade winds blowing across the Atlantic could yet touch all of us. Carl Dinnan, News at 10, Nottinghamshire.
In a moment, we'll get reaction from James in Brussels and Robert, who is here. First, let's go to Washington and get the latest from Dan. Dan, talk in America that the world economy could be hit by tariffs of 20%. What are you hearing?
Well, I think the big question is whether this is going to be a set of targeted tariffs or whether it will be blanket tariffs. If it's targeted, who will be targeted? Speculation that could mean the so-called dirty 15 set of countries, the countries that are most responsible for the trade deficit with the US. If it is a blanket tariff of up to 20%, that's what's being reported tonight in some newspapers here, that will have an enormous impact both here and around the world. And it must be stressed that that would be 20% on top of existing tariffs. So for a country like China, for example, there are already more than 20% of tariffs in place. That would take their total tariffs to over 40%. That's going to have a massive impact for the cost of living here in the United States. Yale University has done a study suggesting if that policy were to be introduced of 20%, it would cost every household here about $3,400. So a massive amount of pain for the US consumer. Now, the White House is stressing, well, look, there might be tax breaks coming down the line. There might be a one-off tax rebate, but we've had no kind of real detail of when and how much any of that would happen. I think the main message from the White House that we're getting is that they want this to be simple, they want it to be fast, but ultimately the only person who's really going to make the final decision on all this is Donald Trump, and we'll know in 24 hours.
Yep, Dan, thank you very much. James, the EU has said it could hit back, but is also waiting to see what it might be hitting back against.
Yeah, it's very hard to measure what your response should be until you know what's coming. I mean, there are already 25% tariffs on European steel and aluminium and cars, for which they have not yet retaliated. There's a great reluctance here to carry on up this escalatory ladder, I mean, because everyone's a loser. I mean, as someone put it, if you're in a boat in the middle of a lake and someone pulls out a gun and shoots a hole in the bottom of the boat, well, the best form of retaliation isn't to pull out your own gun and shoot another hole. But on the other hand, you know, there is a feeling that Donald Trump will carry on down this road unless the American consumer is also made to feel the pain. I think if retaliation does come, it'll be against American services more, rather than goods. The European Union sells a lot more to America than it buys, but on services, things like financial services and big tech and intellectual property, well, there the Americans run a very big surplus. So I suspect that is where it will be targeted when and if the Europeans announce that. So it's a deep reluctance here really to do anything. But it does seem as if the world is on this road, and along with China and Japan and Canada and Mexico and probably the UK as well, there is a feeling that the Americans are going to have to pay a price as well, and that at least it'll affect all of American trade, whereas for Europe and Britain it'll only affect their trade with America itself.
James, thank you very much. Robert, sounds like reluctantly the EU is thinking of striking back. What do you expect the UK government to do?
So the first thing to say is quite how extraordinary it is that governments across the world really don't know what kind of tariffs, taxes are going to be put on by Donald Trump tomorrow. I mean, Keir Starmer's officials have invested an enormous amount of time in getting to know the Trump administration, and talking to them tonight, they say they're really in the dark. Now, we had expected, in fact, Donald Trump said this, that he was calculating how individual countries were going to were discriminating against, in his view, America, and therefore there were going to be different tariff rates for different countries. Now people are saying, well, maybe it'll be 20% for all countries. So an enormously important moment. The position of the British government is very different from that of Brussels and the EU. Keir Starmer, if, and we do expect it, tariffs are imposed on the UK tomorrow, will not retaliate, certainly not for days and probably for weeks, because they believe that they can do a trade deal with America that will ultimately persuade Donald Trump to give us a break, to give us a preferential treatment compared to, say, the European Union. But I have to say, you shouldn't assume from that, even if we're on a path to a better deal, that that's necessarily so wonderful for British consumers and British businesses. In this period of uncertainty, incredibly difficult for businesses anywhere in the world to make investment decisions. When businesses don't invest, we're all poorer. And there's another problem. Let's just say, in the end, and this is what the British government wants, it gets a better deal, let's say on things like car tariffs, than the European Union. Now, at that point, the UK will be in a position where international car manufacturers may want to set up in the UK. But that's really difficult for the EU, because it doesn't want to lose investment to the UK. And you could find a situation where the EU feels under pressure to put tariffs on our manufacturers to even things up. So this is one hell of a mess.